number, biometric data like your fingerprints, your face, all of those things fall under GDPR. It's personal data. Now, GDPR relates to, in terms of GDPR, they say that data collection, which is your personal data, the collection must be lawful, transparent, and secure. There are certain things in terms of what constitutes lawful collection, if you have a good reason, if it deals with national security, if it deals with crime. Then the transparent, people must know where you're collecting the data, what it is for, how you will use it, who you will share it with, and then it must be collected secure. And I'm going to focus on the secure part. That is where information security comes in. Now most people who would be able to comply with this will have what you call an information security management system, which looks at the whole organization, how you collect data, how you treat it, how you process it, how you transmit it, if it's used encryption, how you backed up, if you have disaster recovery plan, all that falls on the information security management system. And one way of addressing GDPR is to have certain ISMSs in place, like ISO 27001 meets almost all the requirements of GDPR. So if you put that in, as long as your country has the laws, you can comply. In Britain, they use something that they introduced a few years ago called the Cyber Essentials Scheme, which is an information security management system for like small, ordinary companies, right? Like your company only have 20, 50 people that can do that. But at the end of the day, to meet the security requirement of GDPR, you must have some sort of system within your organization that actually controls data. Now, some countries are attacking GDPR by taking the actual GDPR law and making that their data protection law. That makes a lot of sense. It's cheap, and you don't have to go and write the wholesale legislation. The EU worked on it for years, and they did a very good job. And if you take their law and make it your law, that's a very great. I would actually recommend it for the Barbados government, because we've had our data protection legislation in draft since 2015. 2005. We've been waiting 13 years. It's crazy, right? I would actually recommend that they look at the actual GDPR that the EU produced and send it to our draftsmen or our legal drafters and put it in. That would help us, right? Yeah, so at the end of the day, organizations need to focus on having some sort of information security management system within their organization. And of course, you're not just going to do it only looking at the EU citizens' data or the personal data. You do it to cover all your data, right? So from an information security point of view, that is my actual recommendation from a company. The other parts, that is up to government, unfortunately, right? Government has to deal with that. Government has to deal with that. Well, they told me that my time has been taken up before, so thank you.
Brilliant. Give the man another clap, man, because he has got his presentation in 5 minutes. David recommended taking the GDPR and looking at it, implementing it as our law. And that sounds so simple. But if I know our government, we're going to enact a law that we're not going to be compliant with. Because I made a mistake. I said Massey has one of the biggest data sets in terms of people and data. But I forgot the immigration department, all right? And if you think about it, there's nobody that interacts with EU citizens more than the immigration department of Barbados. And is anyone willing to stick their head on a block and say that our immigration department is compliant with data protection? Data protection standards? I won't go that far. And before we go down that road, I think that the whole country has to take a hard look and reorient itself with the culture of data privacy. And that would cause, and I think we can probably take this discussion to other institutions in Barbados. And Chad, and well as Andy is right, this is a business discussion. So, and continue the discussion, and hopefully we can take it to other institutions, because I wouldn't want it kept here. right? And we're recording for CBC tonight for the benefit of Barbados as well, and whoever watches CBC. So, con- con- so continuing, Liska Evanson, right? She's going to come do her presentation, and she's also mindful as well of the time. So, and then I want to get into that question and answer section where we can actually start to engage, and hopefully it will help inform Chad as well as the panel in terms of where we go from here, and help us to go and carry this serious topic to the rest of Barbados.
Thank you, Stephen. So just remember, everyone, you came to a free event that is hoping to save you 20 million euros. I'm sure there's a tax deduction somewhere for that, or an expense charge to be made when you go back to the office. All right, so fortuitously, I came up with my original lovely discussion points, and I summarized it all on one hand. First point, and you will realize this as we dive deeper into this topic, there is very little new under the sun. My panelists have alluded to this. The US had this issue come to the forefront in 2003, 2004. They enacted safeguard rules for consumer information, particularly for financial businesses. They did the Can Spam Act, which was an act against non-solicited emails, essentially. They targeted pornography and marketing, but really most non-solicited emails fell under that act. Canada, at the same time that the GDPR was under discussion in 2016, Canada passed its own laws in actually 2014, Canada's anti-spam legislation, which was extended to include viruses and malware as threats and punishable offenses under that legislation. So there's nothing new under the sun. And as per usual, since there's nothing new under the sun, the affected, point two, the affected are greater than expected. So when GDPR came up, you've probably got about 10,000 emails in your account asking you to please, please, please let me keep sending you my newsletter because you've actually consented this time. And a lot of the views have been focused on what this is doing to technology companies, the big ones, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, Samsung, those guys. It hits the developers that intersect between digital marketing and all those big guys. The Bajan on the Apple Store who's just made his version of Geometry Dash that your kid is playing 24/7 and you can't get them to come to dinner, he is one who has to look at GDPR because that kid might be a kid in France and now he's in deep, deep trouble. I mentioned someone remotely associated with technology when I talk about developers. We've heard hotels. We've heard financial institutions. Your GP who happens to give a little lotion to someone who's come down from Europe and got a sunburn has to comply with the GDPR. Because if that person said, oh, I had this sunburn and this lotion gave me an extra rash and I need the information to take to my doctor at the NHS in England when I go back, that doctor has to give that person that information. It applies to schools. One thing that we have forgotten in Barbados is that we are home to a number of NGOs and other great organizations, PAHO, WHO, the UN, they're all down here, and the people who have come from overseas to work at these organizations have children who go to school. Is the school prepared for GDPR? We're thinking no, but one little slip where you confuse Aaron Blackman with Aaron Black-Dashman, and that's a GDPR violation for a school. Our whole education system can't afford 20 million euros right now, far less one school. I would like to think we were small enough for 2%, but given the number of teachers, I fear we fall into a much larger category. And as a panelist touched on, we have a lot of people in the Caribbean with dual or even triple citizenship, and we have citizenship by investment programs. The guy who came in on a kid's passport could be French. That was point 2. Point 3, there is no time for ignorance, but there is room to maneuver. We've heard the fines. They're about to cripple us. Do not run and close down the business and try to find any other work, because there's none. And you would have been a bit presumptuous. There is room to maneuver. There's room for you to meet these obligations under the GDPR. And there's room for you to begin practicing aggressive, transparent, open window communication. Now, I'm going to betray a little bit about myself, but if you have ever lived in a country village at any point in time and anywhere in the world, you will wake up in the morning with everybody saying good morning as they go to work. I used to think this was something Caribbean. No, it happens in pretty much any small town around the world. You will hear everybody saying good morning going to work, and everybody saying good night coming back. That is the level of communication businesses need to begin to think about to comply with GDPR. You are literally saying, is that you, Patsy, that just came back on the bus? Yes, that is Patsy who just came back on the bus. But that person didn't answer when it was Patsy, so I better not assume that that was Patsy who came back. That is literally the mindset that the companies must take right now to comply with GDPR. Point 4, and again, my panelists have alluded to this, so these are summary points for you all. Technology will not save you, but it will help you. When I looked at the GDPR legislation, I did a search for the word automation. It shows up at least 23 times, which is a little scary because on May 17th this year, the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, the specialized agency of the UN, had the World Telecommunication and Information Society Day, and the theme this year was the positive uses of AI. AI floats on a raft, and that raft is called big data. That raft of big data was every hospital, hotel, health study, university, financial institution, people who are accustomed to holding huge banks of data, and artificial intelligence was built on that, and you've just cut out 28 countries worth of data. Let me also give you a little hint that automation and AI was supposed to help with compliance for anti-money laundering and other illegal transactions that go through financial systems like ours. So we're talking about new technologies that are affected by the GDPR that have to rethink how they're developing from the bottom up. Blockchains, which are the in thing, so to speak, do not comply with the right to be forgotten. Because once something, the idea of the blockchain is literally like how you build your wall of your house. The brick goes down, that is the first point of information, and you build all the other bricks in order around that brick. So tell me what happens if brick number 5 of bricks 10,000 in your house decide that they want to pop out. They don't want any more of your house. They are done with your house. And unfortunately, unlike your house, a blockchain can't rebuild itself ignoring number 5 and putting some other information in there. So this is causing a fundamental rethink of new technologies. Finally, point 5. This will only get better or worse depending on your viewpoint. Again, my panelists alluded to it. There are 28 countries under the GDPR, and there's just about no one else on the face of this earth that wants to sit down and rewrite something like the GDPR, which is summarized in 88 pages. Despite the UK leaving the European Union, they were part of it when the GDPR came in, and their data protection bill, which they will be looking to bring in post-exit, will most likely continue to be based on GDPR, with just a couple little twists and turns to keep us on our toes. As a Commonwealth country, tell me, how likely is it that we are going to see the Queen's seal on the law in the UK and not say, well, let us just take this up as Commonwealth countries and apply it? And then next thing we know, we will have this law applying to New Zealand, Australia, every single former English territory, British territory across the world. And we will find ourselves quite literally a little island, because who are we going to trade with without our own bill? So it will only get better or worse. So now is the time for us to take it as an opportunity and rebuild our businesses from the ground up, thinking of security and privacy for the users and our clients and customers and vendors and everyone else, because there are multiple stakeholders when you think of your databases. Or we can just continue to think of it as a threat, and we'll be reeling from punch after punch until we're flat on our backs. So again, 5 very simple points. I think I should be charging, as Evanson's strategy, about €4 million per point at this time. There is very little new under the sun. The affected are far greater than expected. There is no time for ignorance, but there is room to maneuver. Technology will not save you, but it will help you. And this will only get better or worse. And that is the choice of everyone in the room tonight. Okay.
I really enjoyed that presentation. No, I'm serious. I enjoy presentations that make it real, bring it home to people. It's a weighty topic, and to make it real helps you to understand the importance of what this topic is about. So, I know Charles wanted to have a word, all right, and there's some other people. So, what I'm going to do, there are 2 mics, so you can just pass it around to the others. Just raise your hand, because we want to record this as part of a historical document of the start of the GDPR indoctrination in Barbados. So, without further ado, just raise your hand and.
So, you said Charles is first?
Yeah, Charles. Yeah.
I can go. Thank you very. Good night. Can you hear me? Thank you very much, everyone, for what I thought was some excellent presentations. Chad, I just wanted to ask you a question. Given where we are, it seems likely that some of us, and when I said us, I mean companies, right? Obviously, will probably follow. Will probably run foul of some of the regulations. You mentioned May the 24th or the 25th. I don't remember exactly. Is that the 24th or the 5th? Yes. The question is, what is the significance of that date?
Right, in terms of May 25th, that was the day when GDPR came into effect. In terms of May 25th, that was the day when GDPR came into effect across the world. Obviously, in Europe, right? So businesses, companies, governments, and I think that point was critically made as well, are now obliged to be compliant with GDPR. So that's the day when it came into force. But thereafter, it's not, as I said before, and I'm one of the panelists said, it's not just a destination. GDPR is not some place you arrive, you pull in and you get out your car and you go. You have to constantly be in compliance, and it's very, very important. So yes, you have to be compliant, but you have to maintain that compliance, because picture a situation where hackers develop, I mean, they're so creative, you come up with a system to protect data, and within another week or less, the hackers find another way to hack the thing that you spent at least years on developing. So you always now have to be ahead of the curve in thinking, how can I protect the data of EU citizens in an ever-changing, competitive, and very risky environment? So that's the challenge really that companies will have. So in terms of May 25, that's the day when it came into force, but it is really when we know must be cognizant in everything we do, looking through the lens of GDPR from now on.
Lorenzo Herwood. Let me begin by commending you guys for this very informative meeting. It is a bit of a drawback that I must say. No one here is from the European Union, right? Okay, good. Okay, they were invited. Good, because I think one of the panelists missing from here is the European Union for sure. I think they should have been at the forefront of disseminating information to the past government, perhaps current government, and also to the panelists as well, and persons within the general business community. I've been watching the GDPR for the last 2 years, the debates in the EU Parliament and stuff. Perhaps the toughest of the debaters was probably Germany. But I've noticed that there has been so much silence when it comes to small islands as well, or small island developing states. There's not the level of imposition that they had in terms of having workshops all across Europe and Africa and Asia, letting persons know about the GDPR. And such is the importance. I think last week, just 1 week after it came into force, we recognized that Facebook and Google are facing $8.8 billion in lawsuits already. So it is a massive imposition as well. I just wanted to really commend you guys for the effort and say that the GDPR is something that we're looking at intensely, even in my working capacity as well. And I want to put on the record that future interventions or engagements with the Barbadian public, that we need not only invite them, but we need to invite them and re-invite them again in terms of the European Union, because I think they should have been on the ball from the outset, and I think they have failed. I think they have failed to come to the forefront and put this into the public domain as well. There's a whole delegation down here to Barbados and the OECS, and none of the OECS countries have had an informal or formal indication as to these impositions from the GDPR. So that's my comment, sorry.
I just want to put on the record, they have been invited. We did invite them, but they were not, strange enough, in a position to actually make a formal presentation. They have requested that we do a follow-up, and that the next one, they will try to make themselves available. That's why I said this is not a one-off discussion. And what I'm thinking that we can do, after talking to my executive, to fully ventilate the idea, is take this discussion to other business sectors. So maybe the hotel sector, led by us, and maybe, I may not have Chad and the panel back in its current structure, but maybe take elements of the panel with other people with the hotel sector, and then go sector by sector, and then maybe have one for government as well. Because
I was just saying some of the international development agencies would be very interested in this presentation as well.
but thank you.
If I may add on that point, one of the things, to put it in context, we're in the formal hat now. Global Partners International is who I represent here. We're in a formal partnership with Deloitte on this issue across CARICOM. And the step, and I think there's room for you guys to do that, is that it is such a serious thing and it is such an expensive exercise to become compliant, is that really CARICOM now, through its heads of governments, really need to be pushing this thing at a regional level. You understand? There's no time for companies now to be struggling. I mean, companies, the obligation under the GDPR is really for companies to become compliant. Let's state that there. But, and I think it was one of the panelists here alluded to the fact that governments have a key role to play. But given costs and economies of scale, it will be something that CARICOM, for example, should use their institutional capacity to push this thing and save people costs, but also drive it and ensure that at the Caribbean level, we are compliant. I mean, in a matter of days or so, we got the hurricane season, right? I trying to get into St. Martin tomorrow, literally, and I can't get in on Liat because they're still reeling from the effects of the hurricane last year. Real, seriously. So we can't afford any sort of thing in the Caribbean now when it comes to these things and other things. So we have to get our act together. And I think the point that Lorenzo made is a very critical point. Like, we have to really hold everybody to account on this issue.
I just like to respond to the call for CARICOM to take action on it. The CARICOM, yes, is poised to take action. In fact, there's going to be a meeting in CARICOM on Thursday, and the GDPR is on the agenda of the meeting, right? So CARICOM is looking at it.
Good evening, panel. Throughout the various presentations, we've been hearing about the EU. Shireen Flan, sorry. Yes, we've been hearing about the EU. There are 28 member states of the EU right now. There are about 5 candidates to be integrated, 3 potential, and another 15 states. Could you confirm if all under that umbrella considered EU, or just the 28 it applies to, as well as if for the time being the United Kingdom will form and will expect compliance or expected to operate under this GDPR?
One of the things of the European Union, under EU law, any country seeking membership for EU, they have to comply with anything that is going on in the EU. So part of the precondition is whatever the EU states are doing or are about to do or plan to do, you are therefore signing up as part of your condition. So to answer you, yes, those persons who are seeking membership and on the verge of getting the membership, they will have to comply with this. The UK has made it clear as well that notwithstanding that they're going to be leaving the EU via Brexit, I think as the panelists here alluded to, it's still going to be applicable in the United Kingdom, in all 4 countries in the UK. So it's still applicable.
And just to add to that point, even if they do leave the EU, the UK had already pretty much built a data protection bill, which copies almost point for point every single thing in the GDPR. I believe they only have 2 different regulations that I have noted, I can't recall them off the top of my head, in their bill. So at this point in time, it has followed the GDPR or suffered the consequences, because it's quite literally a continent that is following the GDPR.
Michael Ali. I not have a political party or political agenda, so we just have 17 idiots that didn't know what to do. We got 30 now, or 29 plus 1. And I'm not interested in that. This is not about politics for me. My question really is, what effect would it have on a small company operating or doing business with EU citizens? That's my major question. We don't have a framework. What happens? How do the company comply? How do we function in a hostile environment, if I may use such a term? That is my number 1 question, at least my first question.
Okay, my response to that is, for a small company or a large company within our jurisdiction at present, the way you respond to this is probably going to be pretty much the same, because we don't have the legislative framework to rely on. It is your responsibility as, the owner or director of a company to become aware, and you are here now, so that's certainly one of the early steps. Become aware of what is going on, what your responsibilities are, what the requirements are, and you have heard of the punitive side of it as well. And then I would recommend that you, if you need some assistance, you reach out to the person or persons who can help you along the way. Most of these compliance efforts should